And you're laughing when we start. That's fantastic. What a
Fantastic, yeah.
Welcome everybody. I'm Tim Hughes. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. With me today, I've got Jackie Clifford, and Jackie and I are going to talk about the situation where you're probably an individual contributor now. You're certainly not in leadership, and what happens is that you're doing such a good job, you get promoted to going into leadership. So all of a sudden, you're not managing a team, and you've got loads of mates who are the team, and all of a sudden you're being told you'll now need to manage all of those people who are probably mates of yours. So it's happened to me. It happens a lot to people, and this is what we're going to dig into today. And it's a massive issue in the world of business and industry. But Jackie, where can people find you?
You can find me via LinkedIn, so Jackie Clifford on LinkedIn, and I did a little Google of Jackie Clifford Clarity Learning and Development, and that'll take you through to my website, to my X feed, etc. So
it does. I've done exactly the same.
Brilliant, thank you.
So Jackie, give us a little bit of a background about how you got, because you're some people are coaches about everything, but you've chosen something quite narrow, haven't you?
Yes. I've been in learning and development for over 30 years, and I just find this whole idea of leadership and management development absolutely fascinating. But particularly for those individuals that you described, I was a technical specialist. Whether it be I was a scientist or I was a frontline welder, and all of a sudden I'm being asked to, as you said, manage my colleagues, manage my friends, and be some kind of leader. And it's almost as if my organization, as soon as they promote me, they put that title on my job description, and as if by magic, overnight, suddenly I've learned all these skills, I've developed all these qualities. And for a lot of people, it's utterly terrifying. So if I can be of any support to those individuals through what we're doing here today and the work that I do, that brings me joy.
Well, leadership can be a very lonely place. I remember when it happened to me, when there was a sales meeting, when I was an individual contributor, we used to leave the sales meeting and then we used to ring each other up. And then what happened was that the first sales meeting that I ran, and I left, nobody rang me.
Yeah.
And it was suddenly this thing. It's like, wow, everything's changed.
Yes. And I think it's really interesting that when we talk about coaching, for example, we often see the CEO, the C-suite, they've all got their executive coaches. And part of that is that it's a really lonely place to be at the top of the organization. But equally, for a newly promoted manager, a team leader, a first line manager, that moment of, oh, I can't really say that to my best mate any longer. I don't really want to talk to my manager about it because I'm trying to prove how competent I am. So I think wherever you are in that management sandwich, it can be a very lonely place. Absolutely.
So what can if I've just been promoted into a first line manager role, what is it that I can be doing?
I think that on that route to being promoted.
So even before I get there needs to be some sort of getting me ready for that.
Absolutely. And what I'm noticing is that some organizations now are actually giving people some support around making that decision, because there is that it's going to be very different for you. So if I was thinking about moving into a management role, if I was on the cards for promotion, I'd want to perhaps be having conversations with individuals that have been in the same position as me and asking them, what has changed for you? What was different on the day before and the day after you moved into that management role? And really asking yourself whether almost, is it worth it? Because this is a route to achieve more income. And often it's the only route to achieve more income.
Well, you see, in some cases it's not. You see, in the companies that I've worked for, I actually went to somebody and said, "Is this something I should do?" And they said no. And I said, "What do you mean?" I said, "You're a first line manager." And they said, "Yep." And they said, "It's more shit, but the same size shovel."
Yes. Yes, and potentially if you're in sales, you're going to lose the opportunity to earn commission, for example, because
Yes.
you're no longer on that.
And a first line manager role in the company that I work for would earn less than a sales role.
Yeah. Yeah. So then you've really got to say to yourself, is it worth it? What is it that I want to achieve from my career? What is it that I want to contribute to my organization? And a lot of people will want to move into a leadership and management role because they want to, for example, feed into decision-making processes that they haven't been able to do, influence change. So there's a question there around how much will I be able to, what decisions will be within my gift to make? How much will I be able to influence change? So that will help you to make that decision. And then there's that question around, if at some point I have to have a difficult conversation with my best mate, am I going to be able to do that? And if I'm not, what's important to me? Is it my promotion? Is it my management role? Or is it my relationship and my friendship? So there's a real kind of life decision, I think, for a lot of people deciding to move into a leadership and management role. And then once you step into that role, I think my top tip would be to listen. There's often a real kind of drive to prove myself, to prove that I am worthy of this leadership and management title. And so therefore I've got to change everything. I'm going to come in and say, right, we're going to do this and we're going to do that and we're going to do the other. And the team looks at me and wonders what's happened to me.
I was actually given some advice that when you get into first line management role, you have to fire somebody to prove yourself.
Oh.
Which is just awful advice. It's just terrible.
Yes.
I mean, and that's some of the things that you will get bad advice.
Yes. Yes, so I guess that's another tip, isn't it? It's like, be really discerning around who you listen to. Observe those people around you who are in leadership and management roles and ask yourself, what are they doing that I feel is supporting them to succeed? And what are they doing that's really hacking people off and making them not want to follow them anywhere? And there is that thing that we talk about in leadership, particularly around followership. Why would somebody want to follow you? And we often talk about respect and how do you garner respect? And you might garner some fear by sacking somebody, but I don't think you're necessarily
and probably lose
respect.
some trust in the same.
Definitely. So what can you do that's going to engender trust? And my experience just listening to people in organizations is so many people, even today, don't feel heard. So if you can be a leader and manager who listens, you might not be able to act on everything you hear, but if you can then go back and say, I've heard what you said, this is my thinking, let's explore it together. So as well as listening, then there's that bit around collaborating. Sitting on the back of that, there's another tip that I would say, which is, you want to listen, you want to be collaborative, you want to consult. Sometimes you won't be able to. So linked to that trust piece, don't ever consult with people if you know that the decision has already been made. Just be honest with people. And I think there's
That's really good advice, Jackie. Yes.
Because people you can lose trust really, really quickly, and it can take a long time to rebuild it, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was very lucky. The organization I work for had found out that constantly going to employment tribunal was costing them a lot of money. And it was actually, and this is actually because quite often what happens around training is it's seen as a cost. But actually it's a saving, because what happens is that if you're training your people, you're going to get that back in spades. But what was happening was that they were just ending up in tribunal because people were just being awful. And the fines were just.
Yes. Yeah. And it's not just the fine. So there's that real kind of, you can see that pound sign on that invoice or whatever it is you get from the tribunal people. But the emotional cost, I think, of
The management time that it was sucking in terms of if you think about what your time is worth per hour internally, and that it was cheaper to train people.
Yes. Yes. And I think today we're so very, very lucky. Back in the 80s when I came into the workplace, we talked about training and we went on training courses. Now we can learn about leadership and management in so many different ways. So yes, there are, I run workshops, I provide coaching, but there are so many other ways that we can help people learn leadership and management skills. And so talking about learning to lead rather than training to lead, and giving people that opportunity to take a look at themselves and really look at what they bring to the party, because you've been promoted for a reason. So what are you bringing to the party? Where are your strengths? But also, where are the areas that you might need to develop? And that may be some of the stuff around understanding employment legislation, for example. And that's another one of my top tips to new managers. Not saying I want you to use your discipline and grievance procedure, but I want you to be familiar with it. Because if you get to the point where you're needing to manage somebody's performance because they're underperforming, you want to do it properly, because you don't want to be the person who walks through the HR or people team's door and saying, I need them out the door now. What have you done? Well, nothing. I didn't know that I had to. I just want them gone. That's not the way it works in most organizations. So get yourself familiar, make friends with your HR business partner or whatever they're called in your organization, so that actually they can support you and give you advice and guidance, but don't expect them to do those difficult conversations for you.
Yeah, they're a business partner, but ultimately it's you that have to have those kinds of conversations.
Yeah.
And in many cases, certainly what I found was that you would take over a team and a lot of things hadn't been covered in the past. So for example, I wanted to get rid of somebody, and they said, well, you can't get rid of them because they haven't had a set of objectives for the last 8 years. So you can't actually prove that they're not doing their job.
Yes, absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
Mark makes a great comment here. Learning how to ask good questions is an important skill to learn.
Yeah, thank you, Mark, because that was kind of sitting on the back of the listening. Ask really great questions to enable you to listen, to enable you to hear. So some of those lovely open questions that we would use in a coaching situation, tell me about what it's like to do your role. Tell me what you need from me as a manager. Talk to me about where you see things could be better. And so those early days of being a new manager are very much about gathering all of that information and then kind of working it through and making some decisions about where things need to head.
And I think it's important, to show some vulnerability in terms of saying, I trust you. And to say, look, I don't have all the. I know sometimes it's expected that managers have all the answers, but I don't have all the answers.
Yeah.
And actually try and get that you're the people that the coalface come up with, innovate, and then make sure that they are that you don't take the innovation for yourself. You do actually acknowledge that they may have come up with a good idea.
Yeah, definitely. So that how do you get yourself to a position where you feel secure enough to do that? Because I think a lot of poor management and leadership practices actually come from the insecurity of the individual leader and manager. I need to prove myself, so I'm going to steal your idea and take it as my own. Please don't do that. That's like you say, it's such.
I had a manager that did that, and then one day he came to the meeting and said, "You guys don't innovate anymore." And there was lots of conversations going on, instant messaging going, well, yeah, because you come along to you steal all our ideas.
Yes, Absolutely. And that I think really highlights something around a lot of leaders and managers will take actions which then do constrain their team. So there's that lovely phrase, micromanagement. Because I feel more comfortable doing the job that I came from, I'll go back and do the job, or I'll ask you to do something and then I'll do it for you. So then as a team member, why would I do it? If I know you're going to step in, why am I going to do it? Why would I innovate if I know that you're going to steal my ideas? So as you've said, I see one of the roles of the leader and manager is to clear the roadblocks out of the way so that team members can get on and do what you are paying them to do. And as you say, trust them to do it. Definitely.
It's a classic thing, isn't it, when someone gets promoted and they actually say, I'm working as if I've got two jobs.
Yes.
And then when you find out they are actually doing two jobs because they're actually trying to do the job for everybody in the team as well as doing the leadership job as well.
Absolutely. And I think one of the other things I heard you touch on there was you mentioned somebody who'd had no objectives for 8 years. And I think there's absolutely something around being really clear on your expectations, not only what you want people to do, but how you want them to do it. So if you've got organizational behavioral frameworks or values that you want people to live, those give people that framework. But it shouldn't be a cage. It shouldn't stop innovation. It should say to people, most people need some boundaries. But within those boundaries, I can run free. So let me run free and do what might plant my talents where they need to be planted. So letting people know what your expectations are. What is the job? What are you asking them to do? What does good look like? So how will they know that they're doing a good job? And then that feedback piece around supporting good performance. And one of the things that I was told is, well, you don't want to give people too much positive feedback because their heads will get too big. Really? How is that? You wouldn't deprive your plants in your garden, your tomatoes that you plant, you wouldn't deprive them of all the nutrients and expect them to produce really great tomatoes. So why would we want to deprive our team members of those?
It's like Victorian factory owner type advice, isn't it?
Yes. And I think that's a really important point, is when we look at a lot of the management and leadership literature, it is based back in the Industrial Revolution, when we assumed that people just came to work for the money. And if we didn't hit them with a big stick, they wouldn't work hard, which we now know is absolutely not true.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
What do you, in terms of day one, we've talked about not to dump people into people management. We've talked about preparing people. We've talked about having the confidence to listen and having difficult conversations. We've talked about a coaching style of listening. What about being measured, what to do and what to do next?
Yeah, and I think that being measured feels really important, because if we don't give people a sense of their measures of success, how do they know if they're doing a good job? And then how can we as the leader and manager support them to be even better if they're not achieving what we need them to achieve? So that I work with 5 questions, which are, what do you want me to do and why? And that links back through to not only my job description, but importantly, the organizational and the team objectives. So it's that lovely golden thread that we talk about. Then there's that question around, how do you want me to do it, which is the organizational standard. So as a manager, making sure you're aware of that. So on day one, kind of, you need to be able to answer these questions. So you need to have those conversations with your own manager. Then there's that, how will I be measured? What are the outputs you're looking for? And sometimes we're used to outputs, but what are the outcomes I'm trying to achieve? And the behaviors. So what behaviors do I need to be modeling as a manager? What behaviors do I expect from my team members? And then starting to, and again, probably in that first week, establishing how people want to receive feedback. So do they want you to just kind of jump on the table and sing and dance when they do something really well, or do they want to be taken off to one side to be praised? Because a lot of that British mentality, we don't like to be praised in public. And again, another one of those lovely phrases, praise in public and chide in private. But actually, I mean, always, I think, give improving feedback in a private setting. But be prepared to give feedback, but also be prepared to ask for that feedback. So at the end of week 1, how was it for you, team? What would you like me to keep on doing because it's working for you? What would you like me to stop doing because it's not working? And what would you like me to start doing because you didn't see me doing it this week? Which then leads through to that final question of what next? So what will we do next week?
It's great advice, and asking for feedback and people's reflections, I think is, I know we don't like people giving us feedback, but it's so important.
Definitely.
Because it's the only way that we're going to grow. Because if people just pat you on the back and say you're doing a good job, Tim, and you're not, then
yeah. And I guess that would be another thing for me is you're doing a good job, Tim, because it was a good job and I saw you doing this, this, and this, and that's why it was a good job. So that pat on the back is fantastic. That thank you at the end of the week is fantastic. But I appreciate what you've done this week because it contributed in this way. Then means that next week I'm going, oh yeah, that made a difference. And most people want to make a difference in their workplaces.
They do.
Yeah.
Jackie, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about this. Where can people find you?
So Jackie Clifford on LinkedIn. Clarity Learning and Development is my website, but just a little Google Jackie Clifford, Clarity Learning and Development will give you all the details about how you can get in touch with me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.